My name is Olin. I'm a sophomore at the high school, and I am with.
Candance Chow.
Well, that's tremendous. All right. So our first question is, how did you get here today?
By car? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
I did. I drove my car here today.
Okay. Question number 2. Why are you running for city council?
Well, I'm running for city council for several reasons. I've been in Evanston just under 30 years, which may seem like a long time to you. It doesn't seem like a long time to many Evanstonians. And when I came here to go to graduate school at Northwestern. I did my MBA there, and driving after during school, at some point, I was driving down the streets of Isabella for some reason, and I thought, wow, this is one of the most beautiful communities I've ever seen. I didn't think at the time that I would have the ability or the resources to live here, and through all kinds of luck and blessings, I have. And so I'd like to I want to keep giving back to the community. Specifically, I served on the District 65 school board for about 7 years and helped the district move through a financial crisis, and used kind of my background in business and finance to support the schools. And I see that the city has some similar challenges right now. We're operating at a deficit. And so I want to bring that expertise to the table along with the other council members. I also feel like there's a really important role that folks with a business background can have on, kind of continuing to accelerate the economic engine of Evanston, support small businesses, recruit businesses. My perspective is if we're ever going to kind of relieve the burden on residents for tax paying, increasing taxes and supporting city services through taxes, that's going to come through economic development and revenue that we get from businesses and their revenue through sales tax and other taxes that come off of their sales.
You've already talked about your skill set and your background and how you see that helping you on city council. As it relates to the climate crisis, how do you think you can use your skills and background to help Evanston address climate change, and how do you see your skills being applied in that area?
Yeah, well, I think one way in particular, two ways in particular. One is, we are going to, with climate migration, with other climate concerns, we really have to think about our resources, whether those are natural resources, our physical resources, our financial resources, and how are we going to deploy those to, create as much sustainability as we can, and also to respond to what I think will be in the future additional migration due to climate to our area. And so I think my skills will come in very handy there. I also think that, I've spent a lot of my time in the community working with all kinds of constituents, I guess you call them constituents, but also communities within Evanston. And so understanding that needs and interests are very different from one group to the next, students and families, residents from one area of Evanston may have a different opinion than another area of Evanston. So as we're trying to come to kind of a cohesive plan and all get directed towards the same goals, I think my experience there and bringing people together and kind of listening and looking for commonalities will be very useful, so we can all, can deploy the resources and our skills towards a common goal around climate.
Cool. So what are the 2 most important issues that you are focused on addressing as a challenger, and why?
Relative to climate, or just in general?
In general.
General. Okay. One is definitely more just the approach to serving on council. In my ward, I think the current our ward deserves more active and engaged representation, and that's from participation in council meetings to participation on committees to engaging residents in the ward around ward meetings and listening actively one-on-one and in groups. That's really important to me, and I think it's important to Evanstonians, and that's one reason that I'm doing this. It's an issue I want to deal with in terms of representation and leadership. The second is is the situation that we have with downtown and the economics of Evanston right now, and the fact that we really do have to re-envision what our downtown is and how we create energy and purpose and generate more of an economic engine from downtown. And I think that's going to be critical, not only in addressing our budget concerns and financial concerns, but just for ensuring the livability and vitality of Evanston as we go into the next 10 years.
Cool. So many of the policies that have come before council are kind of focused on Evanston's future, such as the HBO and Envision Evanston 2045 and CARP. These policies will have a larger impact on younger people's lives than others, and yet the voices of younger people are often not considered very much when making these kind of policy changes. So if you were elected, how would you kind of elevate youth voices in your work?
Oh, it's an awesome question. In the various kinds of campaigns I've done before, I mean, there's little ways and there's big ways. I've always had youth interns in my campaign. So right now I have 2 interns who are young people, young adults, high school through college, graduated. And I think, that impact on me and understanding what's important to them is really helpful. And it's also important to think about messaging broadly. I think meeting and just conversing and having conversations frequently with youth, whether that's, I did a panel for Kellogg, those are a little bit older than you, but MBA students a couple weeks ago coming to the high school, coming into the community and just talking about what's most important to you. I think those are really important ways. And then also doing whatever you can as an elected official to get people excited about civic engagement and about civic involvement, because, we do need more people to get engaged in this process, whether it's serving on a committee or, being part of an engagement effort or actually running for office. So lots of ways.
So 80% of the carbon emissions in Evanston come from
just going right now in that
buildings sector.
Yes.
A vast majority of that 80% comes from the 500 largest buildings in Evanston. Mm-hmm. So the Healthy Buildings Ordinance, which is currently making its way through council, would mandate energy efficiency improvements, the procuring of renewable energy, and other provisions to ensure that this is done while maintaining affordability. So do you support the Healthy Buildings Ordinance in its current form? And if not, would you want to make any changes before it's passed?
I do think there needs to be some more conversation and work before it's passed. You mentioned without addressing, without impacting affordability, and I think that is the piece that I'm most concerned about. The retrofitting of existing buildings can be extremely costly. I'm sure but we had $7 million of federal grants that were going to help support the pilot and kind of launching of the ordinance, and we don't know the status of that money right now. So I really feel like we need to make sure that we have the ability to implement, and that we're not, many of those larger building owners also have a combination, could have small businesses in their building, have, companies that can't afford to have their rent or their leases jacked up considerably. We already have issues relative to that in our downtown in particular, and we're losing businesses even going to the city. We recently lost ZS Associates that moved back into the city in their buildings. So I'm concerned about that. I totally support the intent of the ordinance, but I think we have to work through unintended consequences and make sure that we can transition there. I also think we have to focus on new building construction too, and as well in terms of policy. But I totally agree with the goals, at minimum the goals of CARP, which are net neutral by 2050, for sure.
Evanston City Council is kind of meant to be a role model for younger people and for the city as a whole when it comes to working together and collaborating to solve important issues that people may not always agree on. The City Council is not always the best example of working collaboratively in a positive and constructive way. So if you were on City Council, how would you work collaboratively with people to address the needs of your ward and the city as a whole?
Yeah, that's a really important component of working collaboratively in a council and a board and any kind of group. And as I said before, is like one of the key reasons that I am running for council. I think a couple ways to do that. One is that you have to do the work and come informed with whatever data that is before you, and that you've gone out to your own ward and collected stories as well as kind of quantitative and qualitative data. And you have to start to build trust with your other colleagues on council, knowing that you aren't going to agree with each other 100% of the time, but spending time talking with them one-on-one, understanding what's critical for their wards to start. The work that is done outside of the council meeting is really, really important to engage with other colleagues. That's where the collaboration happens. That clearly can't be done in a group, but can be done in more one-on-one, and that's what I would invest in. And then I think when you do get in the council setting, because you're more likely to come up with either compromises, ways to get to a common end goal, with a little movement here or there, and know what's really super important to them or for their ward if there's different interests than you. So that's number one. And then number two, I think, is as a council member, if you do have a difference of opinion, you have to engage in the process and help people understand where you're coming from and also bring alternatives to the table. That's one of the things I don't see coming currently from Councilman Suffredin. You can object to something and think that it's not right, but that's not productive. So the productive way is to offer some other options, offer some alternatives. And I think that gains you respect from other council members, regardless of whether you agree on the items or not. So that's what I'd hope to do.
Cool. So next question. What do you view as the biggest impact that climate change either has had or will have in the future on the 6th Ward? And what would you do about it if elected?
On the 6th Ward specifically, I would say there's, our built environment needs to change dramatically over time. And for that, more green infrastructure. So I think, I don't know that it's been an impact yet, but because a lot of the construction in the 6th Ward is older, we don't have a lot of new developments. I think that's going to be a challenge in how do we ensure that we have more green infrastructure and how do we build that in. I think the other piece would be, from a transportation standpoint, we want there to be more walkability and less cars, and yet we have really poor public transit on the north side of Evanston, east to west, right? If you take the bus to the high school, I don't know when it comes anymore. It used to be pretty regular back in the day when my kids were there. So we really have to address that, and I think that's impacting the ability for folks to move to, better modes of transportation. On the whole, I think climate migration is going to be probably that, and the shorefront, the beach, the lakefront is probably going to be the biggest issues that we're going to have to deal with as a community in the long term, including the 6th Ward.
Cool. So that's all the questions I have. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
The only thing I'd like to add is just that this is so much fun, and I wish all the
You're the first to say that.
Really? Okay. Well, no. Your questions obviously well thought out, but the opportunity to engage, and so invite me back anytime if you want, whatever you want to talk about.
Thank you very much.